Isis Unveiled, a master key to the mysteries of ancient and modern science and theology. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, corresponding secretary of the Theosophical Society. I don't know how to pronounce. Ceci est un livre, I don't know, de bon foi, Montaigne. Blavatsky's first major work on... The work now submitted to public judgment is the fruit of a somewhat intimate acquaintance with Eastern adepts and study of their science. It is offered to such as willing to accept truth wherever it may be found, and to defend it, even looking popular prejudice straight in the face. It is an attempt to aid the student to detect the vital principles which underlie the philosophical systems of old. The book is written in all sincerity. It is meant to do even justice, and to speak the truth alike without malice or prejudice. But it shows neither mercy nor enthroned error, nor reverence for usurped authority. It demands for a spoliated past that credit for its achievements which has been too long withheld. It calls for a restitution of borrowed robes and the vindication of calumniated but glorious reputations. Toward no form of worship, no religious faith, no scientific hypothesis has its criticism been directed in any other spirit. Men and parties, sects and schools are but the mere ephemera of the world's day. Truth, high-seated upon its rock of adamant, is alone eternal and supreme. We believe in no magic which transcends the scope and capacity of the human mind, nor in miracle, whether divine or diabolical, if such imply a transgression of the laws of nature instituted from all eternity. We believe in no magic which transcends the scope and capacity of the human mind. Oh, we did this. Nevertheless, we accept the saying of the gifted author of Festus, that the human heart has not yet fully uttered itself, and that we have never attained or even understood the extent of its powers. Is it too much to believe that man should be developing new sensibilities in a closer relation with nature? The logic of evolution must teach as much, if carried to its legitimate conclusions. If somewhere in the line of ascent from vegetable or Ascidian to the noblest man, a soul was evolved. Gifted with intellectual qualities, it cannot be unreasonable to infer and believe that a faculty of perception is also growing in man, enabling him to descry facts and truths, even beyond our ordinary ken. Yet we do not hesitate to accept the assertion of Biff, that the essential is forever the same. Whether we cut away the marble inward that hides the statue in the block, or pile of stone upon outward, or pile stone upon stone outward till the temple is completed. Our new result is only an old idea, The latest of all the eternities will find its destined other half-soul in the earliest. When years ago we first traveled over the east exploring the penetralia of its deserted sanctuaries, two saddening and ever reoccurring questions oppressed our thoughts. Where? Who? What? Is? God? Who ever saw the immortal spirit of man? Who ever saw the immortal spirit of man, so as to be able to assure himself of man's immortality? It was while most anxious to solve these perplexing problems that we came into contact with certain men endowed with such mysterious powers and such profound knowledge that we may truly designate them as the sages of the Orient. To their instructions we lent a ready ear. They showed us that by combining science with religion, the existence of God and immortality of man's spirit may be demonstrated, like a problem of Euclid. For the first time, we received the assurance that the Oriental philosophy has room for no other faith than the absolute and immovable faith in the omnipotence of man's own immortal self. We were taught that this omnipotence comes from the kinship of man's spirit with the universal soul. God. The latter, they said, can never be demonstrated, but by the former. Man spirit proves God spirit, as the one drop of water proves a source from which it must have come. Tell one who had never seen water that there is an ocean of water, and he must accept it on faith or reject it altogether. But let one drop fall upon his hand, and he then has the fact from which all the rest may be inferred. After that he could by degrees understand that a boundless and fathomless ocean of water existed. Blind faith would no longer be necessary. He would have supplanted it with knowledge. When one sees mortal man displaying tremendous capabilities, controlling the forces of nature and opening up to view the world of spirit, the reflective mind is overwhelmed with the conviction that if one man's spiritual ego can do this much, the capabilities of the Father Spirit must be relatively as much vaster as the whole ocean surpasses the single drop in volume and potency. Ex nihilo nihil fit. Prove the soul of man by its wondrous powers. You have proved God. In our studies, mysteries were shown to be no mysteries. Names and places that, to the Western mind, have only a significance derived from Eastern fable, were shown to be realities. Reverently, we stepped into spirit within the temple of Isis, to lift aside the veil of the one that is and was and shall be, at Sais, to look through the rent curtain of the Sanctum Sanctorum at Jerusalem, and even to interrogate within the crypts which once existed beneath the sacred edifice, the mysterious Bath Kol. Bath Kol in Hebrew is likened to the name. I don't know. I won't say anything. It is the Philia Vocis, the daughter of the divine voice, responded from the mercy seat within the veil. In science, theology, every human hypothesis and conception born of imperfect knowledge lost forever their authoritative character in our sight. The one living God had spoken through his oracle, man, and we were satisfied. Such knowledge is priceless, and it has been hidden only from those who overlooked it, derided, or denied its existence. From such as these we apprehend criticism, censure, and perhaps hostility, although obstacles in our way neither spring from the validity of proof, the authenticated facts of history, nor the lack of common sense among the public when we address, whom we address. The drift of each day, the drift of modern thought is palpably in the direction of liberalism in religion as well as science. Each day brings the reactionists nearer to the point where they must surrender the despotic authority over the public conscience, which they have so long enjoyed and exercised. When the Pope can go to the extreme of fulminating anathemas against all who maintain the liberty of the press and of speech, or who insist that in the conflict of laws, civil and ecclesiastical, the civil law should prevail, or that any method of instruction solely secular may be approved. And Mr. Tyndall, as the mouthpiece of the 19th century science, says, the impregnable position of science may be stated in a few words. We claim and we shall wrest from theology the entire domain of cosmological theory. The end is not difficult to foresee. Centuries of subjection have not quite congealed the lifeblood of men into crystals around the nucleus of blind faith. And the 19th is witnessing the struggles of the giant as he shakes off the Lilliputian cordage and rises to his feet. Even the Protestant Communion of England and America, now engaged in the revision of the text of its oracles, will be compelled to show the origin and merits of the text itself. The day of domineering over men with dogmas has reached its gloaming. Our work then is a plea for the recognition of the Hermetic philosophy, the anciently universal wisdom religion, as the only possible key to the absolute in science and theology. To show that we do not at all conceal from ourselves the gravity of our undertaking, we may say in advance that it would not be strange if the following classes should array themselves against us. The Christians, who will see that we question the evidences of the genuineness of their faith. The scientists, who will find their pretensions placed in the same bundle with those of the Roman Catholic Church for infallibility, and in certain particulars, the sages and philosophers of the ancient world class higher than they. Pseudo-scientists will of course denounce us furiously. Broad churchmen and free thinkers will find that we do not accept what they do, but demand the recognition of the whole truth. Men of letters and various authorities who hide their real belief in deference to popular prejudices. The mercenaries and parasites of the press who prostitute its more than royal power and dishonor a noble profession. will find it easy to mock at things too wonderful for them to understand. For to them the price of a paragraph is more than the value of sincerity. From many will come honest criticisms, from many can't. But we look to the future. The contest now going on between the party of public conscience and the party of reaction has already developed a healthier tone of thought. It will hardly fail to result ultimately in the overthrow of error and the triumph of truth. We repeat again, we are laboring for the brighter morrow. And yet, when we consider the bitter opposition that we are called upon to face, who is better entitled than we, upon entering the arena, to write upon our shield the hail of the Roman gladiator to Caesar? Moriturus te salutat. New York, September 1877. XIX. Why don't you cut this part? Before the veil, Jean, advance our waving colors on the walls. King Henry the Sixth, Act 4. Shakespeare. My life has been devoted to the study of man, his destiny and his happiness. J.R. Buchanan, medical doctor, Outlines of Lectures on Anthropology. It is 19 centuries since, as we are told, the night of heathenism and paganism was first dispelled by the divine light of Christianity, and 2.5 centuries since, the bright lamp of modern science began to shine on the darkness of the ignorance of the ages. Within these respective epochs, we are required to believe the true moral and intellectual progress of the race has occurred. The ancient philosophers were well enough for their respective generations, but they were illiterate as compared with modern men of science. The ethics of paganism perhaps met with the wants of the uncultivated people of antiquity, but not until the advent of the luminous star of Bethlehem was the true road to moral perfection. And the way to salvation made plain. Is that correct? Of old, brutishness was the rule, virtue and spirituality the exception. Now the dullest may read the will of God in his revealed word. Men have every incentive to be good and are constantly becoming better. This is the assumption. What are the facts? On the one hand, an unspiritual, dogmatic, too often debauched clergy, a host of sects, and 3 warring great religions, discord instead of union, dogmas without proofs, sensation-loving preachers, and wealth and pleasure-seeking parishioners, hypocrisy and bigotry, begotten by the tyrannical exigencies of respectability. The rule of the day, sincerity and real piety exceptional. On the other hand, scientific hypotheses built on sand, no accord upon a single question, rancorous quarrels and jealousy, and a general drift into materialism. hold on. A death grapple of science with theology for infallibility. A conflict of ages. At Rome, the self-styled seat of Christianity, the putative successor to the chair of Peter, is undermining social order with his invisible but omnipresent network of bigoted agents, and incites them to revolutionize Europe for his temporal as well as spiritual supremacy. We see him who calls himself the Vicar of Christ, Vicar, fraternizing with the anti-Christian Muslim against another Christian nation, publicly invoking the blessing of God upon the arms of those who have for centuries withstood. With fire and sword, the pretensions of his Christ to godhood. At Berlin, one of the great seats of learning, professors of modern exact sciences, turning their backs on the boasted results of enlightenment of the past Galilean period, are quietly snuffing out the candle of the great Florentine, seeking in short to prove the heliocentric system and even the Earth's rotation, but the dreams of deluded scientists, Newton a visionary, and all past and present astronomers but clever calculators of unverifiable problems. Between these two conflicting titans, science and theology, is a bewildered public, fast losing all belief in man's personal immortality, in a deity of any kind, and rapidly descending to the level of mere animal existence. Such is the picture of the hour, illumined by the bright noonday sun of this Christian and scientific era. Would it be strict justice to condemn to racial lapidation the most humble and modest of authors for entirely rejecting the authority of both these combatants? Are we not bound rather to take as the true aphorism of the century the declaration of Horace Greeley, "I accept unreservedly the views of no man, living or dead"? Such, at all events, will be our motto, and we mean that principle to be our constant guide throughout this work. Among the many phenomenal outgrowths of our century, the strange creed of the so-called spiritualists has arisen amid the tottering ruins of self-styled revealed religions and materialistic philosophies, and yet it alone offers a possible last refuge of compromise between the two. That this unexpected ghost of the pre-Christian days finds poor welcome from our sober and positive century is not surprising. Times have strangely changed, and it is but recently that a well-known Brooklyn preacher pointedly remarked in a sermon that could Jesus come back and behave in the streets of New York as he did in those of Jerusalem, we would find himself confined in the prison of the tombs. What sort of welcome then could spiritualism ever expect? True enough. The weird stranger seems neither attractive nor promising at first sight. Shapeless and uncouth like an infant attended by 7 nurses, it is coming out of its teens lame and mutilated. The name of its enemies is Legion. Its friends and protectors are a handful. But what of that? When was ever truth accepted a priori? Because the champions of spiritualism have in their fanaticism magnified its qualities and remained blind to its imperfections, that gives no excuse to doubt its reality. A forgery is impossible when we have no model to forge after. The fanaticism of spiritualists itself is itself a proof of the genuinenesses and possibility of their phenomena. They give, let me see, they give us facts that we may investigate, not assertions that we must believe without proof. Millions of reasonable men and women do not so easily succumb to collective hallucination. And so, while the clergy, following their own interpretations of the Bible and science, its self-made codex of possibilities in nature, refuse it a fair hearing, real science and true religion are silent, and gravely wait further developments. The whole question of phenomena rests on the correct comprehension of old philosophies. Whether then should we turn, in our perplexity, but to the ancient sages, since on the pretext of superstition we are refused an explanation by the modern. Let us ask them what they know of genuine science and religion, not in the matter of mere details, but in all the broad conception of these twin truths, so strong in their unity, so weak when divided. Besides, we may find our profit in comparing this boasted modern science with ancient ignorance. This improved modern theology with the secret doctrines of the ancient universal religion. Perhaps we may thus discover a neutral ground whence we can reach and profit by both. It is the Platonic philosophy, that the most elaborate compend of the abstruse systems of India, that can alone afford us this middle ground. Although 22¼ centuries have elapsed since the death of Plato, the great minds of the world are still occupied with his writings. He was, in the fullest sense of the word, the world's interpreter, and the greatest philosopher of the pre-Christian era, mirrored faithfully in his works the spiritualism of the Vedic philosophers, who lived thousands of years before himself, and its metaphysical expressions, Vyasa, Djamini, Kapila, Vrihaspati, Sumati, and so many others, will be found to have transmitted their indelible imprint through the intervening centuries upon Plato and his school. Thus is warranted the inference that to Plato and the ancient Hindu sages was alike revealed the same wisdom. So, surviving the shock of time, what can this wisdom be but divine and eternal? Plato taught justice as subsisting in the soul of its professor, and his greatest good. Men, in proportion to their intellect, have admitted his transcendent claims. Yet, his commentators almost with one consent, shrink from every passage which implies that his metaphysics are based on a solid foundation and not on ideal conceptions. But Plato could not accept a philosophy destitute of spiritual aspirations. The two were at one with him. For the old Grecian sage, there was a single object of attainment, real knowledge. He considered those only to be genuine philosophers, or students of truth, who possesses the knowledge of the really existing in opposition to the mere seeming of the always existing. In opposition to the transitory and of that which exists permanently, in opposition to that which waxes, wanes, and is developed and destroyed alternately. Beyond all finite existences and secondary causes, all laws, ideas, and principles, there is an intelligence of mind, nous, the spirit, the first principle of all principles, the supreme idea on which all other ideas are grounded, the monarch and lawgiver of the universe, the ultimate substance from which all things derive their being and essence, the first and efficient cause of all the order and harmony and beauty and excellency and goodness which pervades the universe, who is called by way of preeminence and excellence the supreme good, the God, O Theos. The God over all, O Epipasi, Theos. He is not the truth nor the intelligence, but the Father of it. Though this eternal essence of things may not be perceptible by our physical senses, it may be apprehended by the mind of those who are not willfully obtuse. To you, said Jesus, to his elect disciples, it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God. But to them, the Poloi, it is not given. Therefore speak I to them in parables, or allegories, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. The philosophy of Plato, we are assured by Porphyry of the Neoplatonic school, was taught and illustrated in the mysteries. Many have questioned and even denied this, and Lobeck, in his Aglaophomus, has gone to the extreme of representing the sacred orgies as little more than an empty show to captivate the imagination, as though Athens and Greece would for 20 centuries and more have repaired every 5th year to Eleusis to witness a solemn religious farce. Augustine, the Papa Bishop of Hippo, has resolved such esoteric doctrines of the first followers of Plato, and describes Plotinus as a Plato resuscitated. He also explains the motives of the great philosopher for veiling the interior sense of what he taught. The accusations of atheism, the introducing of foreign deities and corrupting of the Athenian youth, which were made against Socrates, afforded ample justification for Plato to conceal the arcane preaching of his doctrines. Doubtless, the peculiar diction or jargon of the alchemists was employed for a like purpose. The dungeon, the rack, and the faggot were employed without scruple by Christians of every shade, the Roman Catholics especially, against all who taught even natural science. Contrary to the theories entertained by the Church, Pope Gregory the Great even inhibited the grammatical use of Latin as heathenish. The offense of Socrates consisted in unfolding to his disciples the arcane doctrine concerning the gods, which was taught in the mysteries and was a capital crime. He also was charged by Aristophanes with inducing the new god Dinos into the Republic as the demiurgos, or artificer, the lord of the solar universe. The heliocentric system was also a doctrine of the mysteries, and hence when Aristarchus, the Pythagorean, taught it openly, Cleanthes declared that the Greeks ought to have called him to account and condemned him for blasphemy against the gods. Plutarch. But Socrates had never been initiated, and hence divulged nothing which had ever been imparted to him. As to the myths, Plato declares in the Gorgias and the Phaedon that they were the vehicles of great truths well worth the seeking. But commentators are so little en rapport with the great philosopher as to be compelled to acknowledge that they are ignorant where the doctrinal ends and the mythical begins. Plato put to flight the popular superstition concerning magic and daemons and developed the exaggerated notions of the time into rational theories and metaphysical conceptions. Perhaps these would not quite stand the inductive method of reasoning established by Aristotle. Nevertheless, they are satisfactory in the highest degree to those who apprehend the existence of that higher faculty of insight or intuition as affording a criterion for ascertaining truth. Basing all his doctrines upon the presence of the Supreme Mind, Plato taught that the Father, nous, spirit, or rational soul of man, being generated by the Divine Father, possessed a nature kindred, or even homogeneous with the divinity, and was capable of beholding the eternal realities. This faculty of contemplating reality in a direct and immediate manner belongs to God alone. The aspiration for this knowledge constitutes that what is really meant by philosophy, the love of wisdom. Philosophia. The love of truth is inherently the love of good, and so predominating over every desire of the soul, purifying it and assimilating it to the divine, thus governing every act of the individual. It raises man to a participation and communion with divinity, and restores him to the likeness of God. This flight, says Plato, in the Theaetetus consists in becoming like God, and this assimilation is the becoming just and holy with wisdom. The basis of this assimilation is always asserted to be the pre-existence of the spirit, or nous. In the allegory of the chariot and winged steeds given in the Phaedrus, he represents the physical nature as composite and twofold. The thumos, or epithumitic part, formed from the substances of the world of phenomena, and the thumoides, the essence of which is linked to the eternal world. The present earth life is a fall and punishment. I actually don't think it's a punishment, but there are different levels of understanding, and I'm not saying this one is wrong. The soul dwells in the grave, which we call the body, and in its incorporate state, and previous to the discipline of education, the noetic or spiritual element is asleep. Life is thus a dream, rather than a reality, like the captives in the subterranean cave described in the Republic. The back is turned to the light. We perceive only the shadows of objects and think them the actual realities. Is this not the idea of Maya, or the illusion of the senses in physical life, which is so marked a feature in Buddhistical philosophy? But these shadows, if we have not given ourselves up absolutely to the sensuous nature, arouse in us the reminiscence of that higher world that we once inhabited. The interior spirit has some dim and shadowy recollection of its antenatal state of bliss, and some instinctive and proleptic yearnings for its return. It is the province of the discipline of philosophy to disenthrall it from the bondage of sense. and raise it into the empyrean of pure thought, to the vision of eternal truth, goodness and beauty, the soul. No, goodness and beauty. The soul, says Plato in the Theaetetus, cannot come into the form of a man if it has never seen the truth. This is a recollection of those things which our soul formerly saw when journeying with deity, despising the things which we now say are, and looking up to that which really is. Wherefore the nous, or spirit of the philosopher, or student of the higher truth alone is furnished with wings, because he, to the best of his ability, keeps these things in mind, of which the contemplation renders even deity itself divine. By making the right use of these things remembered from the former life, by constantly perfecting himself in the perfect mysteries, a man becomes truly perfect, an initiate into the diviner wisdom, or woman, into the androgynous. Hence we may understand why the sublimer scenes in the mysteries were always in the night. The life of the interior spirit is the death of the external nature, and the night of the physical world denotes the day of the spiritual. Dionysus, the night sun, is therefore worshipped rather than Helios, orb of day. In the mysteries were symbolized the pre-existent condition of the spirit and soul, and the lapse of the latter into earth life, and Hades, the miseries of that life, the purification of the soul, and its restoration to divine bliss, or reunion with spirit. Theon of Smyrna aptly compares the philosophical discipline to the mystic rites. Philosophy, says he, may be called the initiation into the true arcana and the instruction in the genuine mysteries. There are 5 parts of this initiation. 1. The previous purification. 2. The admission to participation in the arcane rites. 3. The epoptic revelation. 4. The investiture of enthroning. 5. The fifth, which is produced from all these, is friendship and interior communion with God, and the enjoyment of that felicity which arises from intimate converse with divine beings. Plato denominates the epopteia. Plato denominates the epopteia, or personal view, the perfect contemplation of things which are apprehended intuitively, absolute truths and ideas. He also considers the binding of the head and crowning as analogous to the authority which anyone receives from his instructors, of leading others into the same contemplation. The 5th gradation is the most perfect felicity arising from hence, and according to Plato, an assimilation to divinity as far as is possible to human beings. Such is Platonism. Out of Plato, says Ralph Waldo Emerson, come all things that are still written and debated among men of thought. He absorbed the learning of his times, of Greece from Philolaus to Socrates, then of Pythagoras in Italy, then what he could procure from Egypt and the East. He was so broad that all philosophy, European and Asiatic, was in his doctrines, and to culture and contemplation he added the nature and qualities of the poet. The followers of Plato generally adhered strictly to his philosophical theories. Several, however, like Xenocrates, ventured into bolder speculations. Speusippus, the nephew and successor of the great philosopher, was the author of the Numerical Analysis, a treatise on the Pythagorean numbers. Some of his speculations are not found in the written dialogues, but as he was a listener to the unwritten lectures of Plato, the judgment of Enfield is doubtless correct, that he did not differ from his master. He was evidently, though not named, the antagonist whom Aristotle criticized when professing to cite the argument of Plato against the doctrine of Pythagoras, that all things were in themselves numbers, or rather inseparable from the idea of numbers. He especially endeavored to show that the Platonic doctrine of ideas differed essentially from the Pythagorean, in that it presupposed numbers and magnitudes to exist apart from things. He also asserted that Plato taught that there could be no real knowledge if the object of that knowledge was not carried beyond or above the sensible. But Aristotle was no trustworthy witness. He misrepresented Plato, and he almost caricatured the doctrines of Pythagoras. There is a canon of interpretation which should guide us in our examinations of every philosophical opinion. The human mind has, under the necessary operation of its own laws, been compelled to entertain the same fundamental ideas in the human heart, to cherish the same feelings in all ages. It is certain that Pythagoras awakened the deepest intellectual sympathy of his age, and that his doctrines exerted a powerful influence upon the minds of Plato. His cardinal idea was that there existed a permanent principle of unity beneath the forms, changes, and other phenomena of the universe. Aristotle asserted that he taught that numbers are the first principles of all entities. Ritter has expressed the opinion that the formula of Pythagoras should be taken symbolically, which is doubtless correct. Aristotle goes on to associate these numbers with the forms and ideas of Plato. He even declares that Plato said, Eleusinian and Bacchic mysteries. He even said that forms are numbers. He claimed that Plato said forms are numbers, and that ideas are substantial existences, real beings. Yet Plato did not so teach. He declared that the final cause was the supreme goodness, to agathon. Ideas are objects of pure conception for the human reason, and they are attributes of the divine reason. Nor did he ever say that forms are numbers. What he did say may be found in the Timaeus. God formed things as they first arose, according to forms and numbers. It is recognized by modern science that all the higher laws of nature assume the form of quantitative statement. This is perhaps a fuller elaboration or more explicit affirmation of the Pythagorean doctrine. Numbers were regarded as the best representations of the laws of harmony which pervade the cosmos. We know too that in chemistry the doctrine of atoms and the laws of combination are actually and as it were arbitrarily defined by numbers. As Mr. W. Archer Butler has expressed it, The world is, then, through all its departments, a living arithmetic in its development, and a realized geometry in its repose. The key to the Pythagorean dogmas is the general formula of unity and multiplicity, the one evolving the many and pervading the many. This is the ancient doctrine of emanation in few words. Even the Apostle Paul accepted it as true. Ex auton kai di auton kai eis auton ta panta. Out of him and through him and in him all things are. This, as we can see by the following quotation, is purely Hindu and Brahmanical. When the dissolution, pralaya, had arrived at its term, the great being, Para Atma, or Para Purusha, the Lord existing through himself, out of whom and through whom all things were, and are, and will be, resolved to emanate from his own substance the various creatures. Manava, Dharma, Satra. The mystic decad 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10 is a way of expressing this idea. The one is God, the two matter, the three combining monad and duad, and partaking of the nature of both is the phenomenal world. The tetrad, the four, or form of perfection, expresses the emptiness of all, and the decad, or sum of all, involves the entire cosmos. The universe is the combination of 1,000 elements, and yet the expression of a single spirit. A chaos to the sense, a cosmos to the reason. The whole of this combination of the progression of numbers in the idea of creation is Hindu. The being existing through himself, Swayambhu, or Swayambhuva, as he is called by some, is one. He emanates from himself, the creative faculty, Brahma, or Purusha, the divine male, and the one becomes two, out of this duad union of the purely intellectual principle with the principle of matter, evolves a third, which is Viraj, the phenomenal world. It is out of this invisible and incomprehensible trinity, the Brahmanic Trimurti, I can't roll the R, Trimurti, that evolves the second triad, which represents the three faculties: the creative, the constructive, conservative, and the transforming. These are typified by Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, but are again and ever blended into one, unity. Brahma, or as the Vedas called him, Tridandi, is the God triply manifested, which gave rise to the symbolical Om, or the abbreviated Trimurti. It is but under this trinity, ever active and tangible to all our senses, that the invisible and unknown monas can manifest itself to the world of mortals. When he becomes Sarira, or he who puts on a visible form, he typifies all the principles of matter, all the germs of life. He is Purusha, the God of the three visages, or triple power, the essence of the Vedic triad. Let the Brahmas, know the sacred syllable A-U-M. Om. The 3 words of the Savitri, and read the Vedas daily. Manu. Book 4, Sloka. After having produced the universe, he whose power is incomprehensible vanished. Again, absorbed in the Supreme Soul, having retired into the primitive darkness, the Great Soul remains within the unknown and is void of all form. When having again reunited the subtle, elementary principles, it introduces itself into either a vegetable or animal seed. It assumes at each a new form. It is thus that by an alternative waking and rest, the immutable being causes to revive and die eternally all the existing creatures, active and inert. Manu. He who has studied others. What is that? Oh, okay. And others. He who has studied Pythagoras and his speculations on the monad, which after having emanated the duad, retires into silence and darkness, and thus creates the triad, can realize whence came the philosophy of the great Samian sage, and after him that of Socrates and Plato. Speusippus seems to have taught that the physical or thumetic soul was immortal, as well as the spirit or rational soul. And further on we will show his reasons. He also, like Philolaus and Aristotle, in his disquisitions upon the soul, makes of aether an element, so that there were 5 principal elements to correspond with the 5 regular figures in geometry. This became also a doctrine of the Alexandrian school. Indeed, there was much in the doctrines of the Philhellenes which did not appear in the works of the older Platonists, but was doubtless taught in the substance by the philosopher himself, but with his usual reticence was not committed to writing, as being too arcane for promiscuous publication. Speusippus and Xenocrates after him held, like their great master, that the anima mundi, or world soul, was not the deity, but a manifestation. Those philosophers never conceived of the one as an animate nature. The original one did not exist, as we understand the term, not till he had united with the many, emanated existence. The monad and duad was a being produced, the Timaeon, honored Timaeon. The something manifested dwells in the center as in the circumference, but it is only the reflection of the deity, the world soul. In this doctrine we find the spirit of esoteric Buddhism. A man's idea of God is that image of blinding light that he sees reflected in the concave mirror of his own soul, and yet this is not, in very truth, God, but only his reflection. His glory is there, but it is the light of his own spirit that the man sees, and it is all he can bear to look upon. The clearer the mirror, the brighter will be the divine image, but the external world cannot be witnessed in it at the same moment. In the ecstatic yogin, in the illuminated seer, the spirit will shine like the noonday sun. In the debased victim of earthly attraction, the radiance has disappeared, for the mirror is obscured with the stains of matter. Such men deny their God, and would willingly deprive humanity of soul at one blow.